thank you, and our panelists for this morning, for Florida and Eva. I think that was a really good start for a discussion. The panel, this second panel, is intended to build out the facts that we want to do. And really these conversations positive electricity message to the world that problems in social health are not solved, that there is this horrible neglect and ongoing violent problem. And at the same time, what we heard this morning is that the violence against women is not more competitive than the it happens when they try to organize, or it happens when they go back home after trying to be part of the union. It happens when they try to say, we're not going into the wrong causes because it's a crack in the building, and then it gets stopped. The question now is about trying to figure out how do you move forward. And I have three amazing examples that put together really different pieces of this puzzle. Inequality that has now suddenly opened people up. And living in the United States in the last Supreme Court decision on the cuts in the FEC is going to give a lot more power to the corporations. And I think a recent study by Princeton said that the U.S. is no longer a democracy, but an oligarchy with statistics. So I think that side is really gotten bought, and so we really need to organize in a profound way to try and fight the kind of power these corporations have. And they're not just specific corporations, it's the whole system, and I think we need to do something to challenge that. Turn over to Ellie Neal. Thank you. Hi. I'll try to get the background. I'll do a little bit. I start with the organizing and National Organization for Women. And we early took a position on pro-collective bargaining and understanding that if we ever going to raise women's wages to any kind of equality, that we had to be pro-collective bargaining. That reality is that women who are in unions make more on the average than women who are not. It's just as simple as that. Plus, almost all of our early cases were for workers in either factories or in retail chains, etc. Now sued a great deal to try to gain. We sued on the basis of sex and race discrimination, but the reality is it was for workers in as I said, either manufacturing or retail or jobs that you could measure easier. And basically, we might not have won in court, but we did do a lot of court settlements, et cetera. And we took a very strong role when I became president in 77, that's third day three, but anyway, for working with unions and working with the newly formed at that time, in 1974, Coalition of Labor Union Women. And we have tried to be in sync with the women in unions as well and to promote women's leadership, et cetera. The Feminist Majority Foundation, which was formed in 1987, also has a global role. We decided that the movement had changed a great deal, that the women's movement was now international and global. And so we wanted to have all our work have a global focus, and became very involved in various United Nations efforts. But our biggest effort was has been to fight the Taliban in Afghanistan, and we fought gender apartheid before the Taliban was defeated, and we started that project in 1996. The reason I mention that is that a lot of our windows to understanding organizing in the world has come from Southeast Asia. And we became very interested in reaching out to women's organizations, obviously in Afghanistan, but as we went, Pakistan, and also we've been very interested in Bangladesh. In fact, our last global director was from Bangladesh. Now, having said all this, needless to say, both the National Organization for Women and the feminist majority have taken strong positions against sweatshops, not only in globally, but here in the United States. Let us not forget that we have sweatshops right here and exploitation of workers in the United States. And in fact, all of our understanding is informed not only by the global, but by the domestic. I mean, the patterns of exploitation are very obviously very similar. All the things that you just said about piecework, that's happened in the United States, obviously, and everything that you all have said. And I really salute the three labor leaders that spoke to us this morning, not only for your bravery and courage, but I could identify with it in a more modest way because our organizing challenges and feminism here have needed family support. Leaders have been threatened, and in some cases, more than threatened. So basically, my heart goes out, and I just wish we were doing more. So what can we do more? And I'm now looking from a feminist leadership position in the United States, but also there are feminist groups, as you well know, worldwide. And I feel that we must put into the component of the fight organizing women, feminists, worldwide to support the organizing efforts for better wages and the ending of sweatshops and the horrible exploitation of women's workers worldwide. And that we have to support it hand in glove. Basically, in constructing an international organizing effort, I think we should not think of the movement here in the United States in isolation. When we took on gender apartheid and Taliban, with the Taliban, God knows we never didn't know what we were really doing. We never had organized such a campaign. But we learned one thing, that organizing worldwide is no different for us than organizing domestically. It might be more challenging, but gosh, with the modern communication, it's right now as easy to call Afghanistan as it is New York. It's just there's a time difference, obviously, and language barriers. But it is amazing how much easier it is today. And every day it gets easier with modern technology. So basically, we had over 250 women's organizations in the United States working on Stop Gender Apartheid at that height of that campaign. But just as importantly, we reached out to the European Parliament and to the entire structure of European feminist groups, which increased our clout. We were not only doing it here for the United States, but also from Europe. And then we reached out to the women's movement in Japan, and they entered. And remember, Japan is one of the largest economies in the world and the second largest contributor to the United Nations. So basically, it was coming from all directions. And we, I know, influenced the decision for the United States not to recognize and the United Nations not to recognize the Taliban. Now, fast forward to what's happening in Bangladesh and the collapse of the factories there. As we all know, this has been going on for years, decades actually. But the important thing is, it has now captured some of the public's attention with massive publicity in the last couple of years. And I feel that we have to capitalize on that and organize internationally with the women's movement so that people don't support this exploitation and put on pressure directly on the retailers and the manufacturers. In other words, we can, as a movement, put direct pressure on the major retailers and the factories, the brand names that are employing contract workers, and you know the whole mechanism. They say they don't run the factories, that the indigenous company does, and they're not. You know all the excuses. We just got to break through the excuses and put massive pressure on the brand names and the retailers in Europe, in Japan, in the United States, wherever the sales are, so that the human condition excuses end. And I feel that the women's movement now is in a position to help much more than we currently are. And there's another thing I find very encouraging is that we have our own media. We all of us have websites, Twitter, face, all the various mechanisms of getting out the word instantly. In other words, we're live streaming right now, but there's so millions of people today in the United States, and I believe worldwide. And we just got to organize it, to synchronize it, to deliver the power on the retailers and the manufacturers or distributors, wherever the economists or the labor organizers believe it's a strategic point. I do not see the two movements as competitive at all. We are not union organizers. We need union organizers to do that part. But we are human rights organizers. We are women's rights organizers. We can bring to the table the powerful voices of the consumers, of the not only the consumers, but all the different branches of human enterprise, the lawyers, the doctors, the professors, from every walk of life, we can bring strength to the on-ground organizing effort, so that you have and you can feel the power of the worldwide feminist movement that is really, in many ways, the conscience of the nations in the world. So I feel that one can help the other. And we had it in the year 2000, the Feminist Majority sponsored a feminist expo in the United States. We had over 1,200 organizations participating. 1,200 women tried to come from the developing nations, and there's a bias in our immigration laws against single women and women in general. So with 10 people working on it, we only got, and the cooperation of the State Department, we only got 400 and some visas. But the reason I'm mentioning that, just think of, with an organizing effort really of one organization, not the largest in any way, measure, we brought 7,000 people to an expo, representing 1,200 different organizations, many of them from the developing world. The power of this movement is so vast. I believe that in the United States alone, we could have over 1,000 groups working on supporting your efforts in Bangladesh and Cambodia and Honduras on a regular basis. It's an organizing effort, but it's doable today because of communication and because of the development of so many organizations working on women's rights in all sectors of the economy, not just in the United States, but in the other developed industrialized countries, and frankly, in the developing world. Plus, I believe we've got to put pressure on women's political leaders to represent and understand they are representing the women of their country and the women of the world. And I believe it all can happen. I'm actually want to salute this meeting, and I can tell you the feminist majority, and I believe the leading feminist organizations in the United States will help in every way we can. We might not be the richest people in the world, but on the other hand, we have the hopes and dreams of a better world. And I believe volunteer effort is still one of the most powerful tools the feminist movement has, and I think that we understate its power. We think only in terms of dollars as power or paid work. In reality, I think what changes the world is the dream and the hopes that, by damn it, we're going to change this. And we can't keep on. Our young global director wrote her high school papers on the exploitation of garment workers in Bangladesh 20 years ago. And when the Plaza tragedy happened, or crime, in my opinion, happened, she showed me the paper and showed me this and said, Ellie, nothing's changing. Got to organize differently. And I pledge that we can and will.
Thank you so much. I'm ready. I'm excited. Okay, Ollie, I am so ready. We've been waiting to hear that, to be together. Thank you to ILRF for organizing this. Thank you, sisters in the back of the room, because indeed, as we just heard Ellie say, it's the dreams and the hopes, but really more important, it's the struggles. And we recognize it is struggles, it is sacrifice, it's the threats when you go into your factories, and the fact that you stand up each and every day not knowing what's going to happen. So many thanks, because it's really the work that you're doing that allows us to support you here. So I feel like, we've got it. We're committed. I also want to thank ILRF and many people in this room, because when Judy first approached me about coming and talking about women's rights or workers' rights, I smiled. So I look at many people around the room, and we looked at each other and we said, we love it. We've been trying to do this. We had a group of us that tried, and Lisa and others have been in this struggle. We had a campaign called Women's Rights or Workers' Rights with Mary Robertson. I mean, we've been trying to build this, and it's been very challenging because, indeed, it is such a key issue. But hello, Pedro. He knows me from the Dominican Republic. I talk too quickly. Okay, slowing it down. I'm going to take the Dominican thing out. Okay. So I want to start by talking first about what's going on globally, and then get down to what Radhika and Ellie have talked about. What is the agenda that we need to work on together? So we've heard that we are up against challenges. We've heard about the shifts in the global workplace. And I want to put on the table that we are facing one of the largest challenges, which is a global governance gap. And I will come to that. But really, we don't have any governance in the global economy. And that is what we are trying to create. We need to create, and I'm going to use the word binding, agreements, and I will get to why it's so important, binding versus voluntary. But we have a real gap in how workplaces, rights, all of trade, Radhika mentioned, but global economic policies and the way corporations are operated in the global economy. It is up to all of us in this room to fix that global governance gap. This is no easy challenge, but I'm going to give us some ideas here. First of all, who are we talking about when we talk about the global workforce? We have about 2.9 billion people out there working every day. The estimate, and 50% of workers, although it grows every single day, are in informal, precarious work. Why is it growing? This is not like we just all woke up one day and suddenly we're all temporary workers. This is a strategy. I want to underscore what Radhika was saying. It is a strategy by corporations. If we do not have unions, if we push back on the sisters there, and we make sure they cannot build power in a factory, we can hire and fire at will. We can force them to go into a building when we know it's about to collapse. We can lock them in factories. These are strategies. This is not just like, oh, oops, there was a mistake. These are corporate strategies that we, the collective we in this room, need to take on together. Indeed, the labor movement can't do it alone. The women's movement can't do it alone. So we really need to come together. And I want to, also recognize the representatives of our government here, who you do stand by us and try to also, because governments play an important role in the global governance gap. So here's the reality. The labor movement, as I'm sitting here telling you about building global power, represents only about 7% of workers globally. Y'all hear that? 7%. So that means we have 93% of the world to organize. And the informal economy, although right now there are really innovative strategies to organize in the global economy, and I'll talk about a few of them, it is not a huge percentage. We have great models ranging from the Self-Employed Women's Association of India to the waste pickers, to the women in the informal economy globalizing and organizing as a network. WIEGO, W-I-E-G-O, you can look them up. That brings together that network of home-based workers, trying to figure out how do you represent and build power. But it's not just those informal economy worker organizations. I want to make clear, we are working, the labor movement, to build strategic alliances with them. Whether it's, I know we're talking more globally, but we have our Walmart here, we have the fast food worker campaigns here, we have the coalition of Immokalee workers. There are sparks throughout our country, the domestic workers. And we are creating, and I would be remiss saying, the New York Taxi Workers Alliance, led by a woman leader. We are creating strategic alliances with these organizations, some of which, given our labor laws, it's very hard to have them seen as traditional unions, but for other reasons, it's strategic to have alliances. So there is a lot of exciting work going on. As we sit here, I just want to expand the picture a bit. We've heard from Cambodia, we've heard from Bangladesh, and we've heard from Ibrahimina in Honduras. And as we're here, we also can see that workers throughout the supply chain cannot be squeezed anymore. They have said enough is enough. And as we sit here, workers in Haiti are fighting and going on strike and getting fired in the Sonapi export processing zone in Port-au-Prince for a higher minimum wage. The minimum wage, the government does not even want to permit to be 300 gourds, which is less than $5 a day. We have workers throughout China, for those that are following the major strikes happening in China, major brands, U.S. brands, these workers are going on strike. They are saying we cannot be squeezed anymore. We are seeing this throughout the supply chain. So whether we're there or not, the workers are organizing and the workers are demanding power. And I think that's something really important for us to understand. We need to figure out how we support this energy that's already out there globally and how we make sure that their voices are heard. And I love it that Ellie has committed to working with us to pressure the brands, because I'll take you up on that. And dealing with these brands who will sometimes agree to pay a minimum wage increase in the United States, but will not sign on to binding agreements or pay minimum wages in their supply chain. You cannot have such an incoherent strategy in your supply chain. You cannot say it is okay, we agree to pay $10.10 if it passes in the United States at minimum wage, but we will not pay the minimum wage fight in Cambodia, the minimum wage increase that's being demanded, or pay compensation for the tragedies like we hear in Bangladesh. There should not be tragedies, Billy's saying that's correct. So we have a lot of work to do. So I come with a bit of a challenge to all of us on, what is it that we can do together? Because I think there's a lot that we can do together. First of all, I absolutely agree with Radhika. We need to develop a way of popularizing this information. And just in time, Radhika, the labor movement is developing an update of its common sense economics. So we are finishing just today, and next few days we'll be rolling out a global aspect of common sense economics. What that is trying to train people in the United States, basic things around supply chains, about economic rights, what's happening globally, how has our workplace changed? Because whether you are a member of the United Steelworkers of America producing tires, you need to understand that you're connected to your brothers and sisters in Liberia tapping rubber for those tires. And that the more we can build power throughout that supply chain, the more we can be connected, the more powerful we all are. So that is just one example. We would love to test it with you, work with you. It's always a work in progress. And I think you're absolutely right that we need to have a feminist version analysis. It is missing. And our next challenge, so we're not too late. I see Lisa saying, we're not too late. We are going to be developing a global module to use with global partners. So I invite us all after this meeting to sit down and others interested in popular education. So that's one very concrete thing I think we can do together. Post-2015 agenda. Excellent, because we absolutely need to bring together the trade and development agendas. And the post-2015 agenda, again, when you're sitting here and representing the labor movement, people roll their eyes at me like, oh my goodness, here she comes again. But what is so key, and you're right, we need to work together, is that decent work is key to that agenda. And we were at the UN Commission on the Status of Women. They are talking about that. And so we commit to working with you. We'd also love to work with you when the Center for Women's Global Leadership does shadow reports on women's issues, that we bring our labor analysis to those shadow reports. So let's bring our movements together. I also like to say that my job at the AFL-CIO is a lot about using a bunch of really weak tools. And yes, I'm looking at my friends from the U.S. government. A lot of very weak tools. We have in trade agreements, and so we currently have a lot of submissions and complaints. One is one we have in Honduras. Evangelina has been a partner with us on this. Trade is key. Our trade model is broken. And I won't spend a lot of time here talking about it. The AFL-CIO, we have our position online. It's a trade model that's broken because basically it's not about trade. Those of you that think the debate in our country is about trade are wrong. The debate in our country is about what are in those agreements that really have nothing to do about trade, that have to do with investment, that have to do with the access that corporations have versus people, the ability for corporations to sue when people, we're talking about land rights in Mexico, wanted to protect their land from a mining company, Exxon, and got sued. So this is what's at stake in our trade policy. So I encourage all of us, again, one, to get educated, become part of what we're part of a global campaign. The global labor movement is campaigning with our union partners, and we'd love to make those connections with women organizations and development organizations around the trade work. A couple other ways that we can all get together. We have on the table the labor movement, and I want to give a shout out to George Miller's office. He's not here. We've got Richard Miller out there supporting the call for an ILO convention on violence in the workplace. We are trying to get that on the agenda of the ILO because, as we heard from our sisters, violence at the workplace is something that occurs way too often. And the connection here, which I think we need to make, is what happens when there's violence in the workplace, and how does that undermine freedom of association? You are not going to organize if someone is threatening to dishonor you, as our Bangladesh sister was saying, sexual violence in the workplace. What is that going to do with workers' interest in building power at that workplace? It is going to obviously decrease the ability of workers to do that. So we'd love to come together on a campaign to get the ILO Convention on Violence in the Workplace. I see that our lunch speakers here, but I do want to get to two other issues where I think we need to work together. And I know that we have really big advocates in the room for this, and that is around the corporate accountability, because I do think that's where we can really build bridges. Ellie mentioned that we need to take on brands together. And absolutely, I would love that because I think they get tired of hearing from me and certain people. But what's at stake is we've had an industry, the corporate social responsibility industry. That's what's happened in reaction to the brands got very savvy. They created public relations, and they have invested millions and millions of dollars to address, lots of the problems. Now, I want to give you the difference between the story we heard from Evangelina about the Fruit of the Loom Accord, the Bangladesh Accord, and the rest of these corporate social responsibility programs. And it's particularly important around the women's piece. And we talked about this at the UN Commission on the Status of Women, as women's groups start turning to corporations for more money. It is okay, as I tell companies where they always see me and they get nervous, I've got my AFL-CIO badge, and I say, but we build schools for women and children. What more do you want? And I always say to them, I want schools for women and children. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I want to make sure that throughout your supply chain, those women workers have the right to organize, work free from discrimination and from harassment in the workplace, bargain collectively, and they have decent work in the workplace. The current model of corporate social responsibility about doing more public relations than actually transforming labor relations and transforming the supply chain is something we collectively need to take on. We need to know that the women's movement is not supporting companies and their PR attempts at corporate social responsibility. And the current models that Evangelina spoke about are models we need to build up. They're few and far between. We need to scale them up. And the real difference is you want a model that's binding, not voluntary. That's what the current fight is in global governance and corporate accountability. You do not want, at the end of the day, right, sister from our Walmart gets to say to the Bangladeshi workers, all right, I made sure the bathrooms were looking a little bit better and they have some clean drinking water, but it's been nice. We're really not responsible for you in the supply chain. Versus what the Bangladesh Accord says and what some of these other models say, which is we have a responsibility to these workers, That is a huge difference. That is a break in what we've been trying to do with global governance and corporate accountability in the last 20 years. So I invite all of you to join us in this work because, again, I am so excited to be up here and to get this renewed energy. We can get popular education and train our members together. We can use our tools, whether it's the Ruggie principles. We can go to the ILO, the International Labor Organization, the OECD guidelines, which very few people know about, that cover supply chains, and you can put complaints in against corporations. We can share our tools. We can work with you on the UN periodic review. We need to do this together because together as a movement, not a labor movement and a women's movement, but a global economic, a kick-ass social justice movement, we can do it together. And I'm really excited to start it with all of you. Thanks.
Overcharge. Thank you very much, and certainly thank you to all of you for being here, for your involvement. I'm very excited about this forum. I'm very excited about the organization that's going on. I was also very excited as I sat down to listen to Kathy talking about where this conversation, this campaign got to go, which is going to have success. After 40 years of chasing this industry around the globe, with various partners in and out of the Congress, you would have to say that we weren't terribly successful. We had great moments in history and great moments of political discomfort for some people in this industry, but that's not a policy, and that hasn't changed the relationship between women in this industry and their employers and the brand, and that's what has to be changed. And I think there's a real opportunity when I look around here to see that happening. I said certainly since my trip to Bangladesh and spending time talking to so many women in the industry, victims of the industry, people who are trying to organize in the industry, people who are really working on behalf of their co-workers, and I think the betterment of their country, but they're doing it, and they have to have a great deal of courage to do this. This is not easy. Retaliation is taken all of the time, but the fact of the matter is, this industry develops social and economic structures, and they work very often within countries with social and economic structures perpetuate violence against women, controlling factors of violence against women. Certainly in this industry, if I think about I'm going to be retiring at the end of this term, that would be my takeaway for this industry. They've devised a system of violence that is all controlling and all exploitive of the women, causes women to live in fear. The rationale is, if you think things are bad in the South, you think they're worse on the street. That's not a basis on which you can enslave people. That's not a basis on which you can deny people their basic fundamental human rights, and that's not a basis on which you get to perpetrate violence against those individuals. And that's what is in fact happening here. And I think that's an organizing principle. And I think it's forceful with the organizing principles in other areas of the political spectrum, where so many in this room have worked against. Not only the great success we've had women's issues in this country and elsewhere in the world, and I think with great sense of respect, I was here for almost that entire battle of what it takes to do that, but we've also changed the minds of hundreds of millions of people around the world about the rights of women and the absence of rights for those who would violate them, who would take advantage of them, who would deny them their basic rights. So I think of this industry, the garment industry, almost every facet of this of movement of people within this industry, coming to work, leaving work, at work, when it's time to be paid, when it's time to stop your shift. There's a very arbitrary impositions that can be made on women. You can't leave now, we need you to work longer. What about my family, my children? You got to work longer. And the federal is, you don't. It's your last hour here. Wages are trying your ability to stay in poverty and never get the wherewithal to provide adequately for your family or to actually think about taking on additional responsibility. Forced overtime is at the command of the employer. Payment, however, is also maybe at your floor supervisor or the job boss. I don't know the exact terms of people on the floor. They may rob you of that overtime because they can't, because you're imperiled with your economic security, with your job. Harassment, and again, from testimony of so many women we talked to, that the opportunity of the various employers within the company, they left the floor, that they left their job. So he told them all was safe. See the tiers of tyranny that take place in this industry, and they're driven from the top. Driven from the top. These brands know exactly what's going on, because if you talk to the manufacturers, in the industry, they'll tell you how demanding the industry will be, how the industry can pivot on a dime. We need this, we need that. You do it this way, you do it that way. And the industry is in full control of this. They just refuse to take responsibility. And we'll put up some money, and maybe if they can borrow some money from us, and they can fix their factories. But we're not going to be into this for hard cash, knowing that the mean, they might want to flee the next disaster. Not of their making, maybe, but the price, the PR will be too high, and they'll move. They'll go to Indonesia. This is a tough one. These are not amateurs. These are skills and practices and storylines that have been built up over the last 40 years, and you know, in our early days, they were built up in our own history for a period of time. But I think that's it. People say, well, you can't do this. You can't you can't win this when the brands are too powerful. In my 40 years, you know, I've been around a lot of legislation. It isn't going anywhere. It doesn't stand a chance. It can't happen. I don't know. I look at the Civil Rights Act. I look at the Clean Air Act. I look at the Fair Pay Act, the Clean Water Act. These were all laws today that were going nowhere when they were introduced. And that's the nature of this campaign. It's so fundamental, so cross-cutting, that this isn't something that we expect to be done in 30 days or 90 days. But we know there are parties of responsibility, including our government, our relationships with respect to this industry and the host nations. There's responsibility internationally. There's clearly responsibility with the brands, and that has to be brought home. And I think there's a tough fight. But I think that if you don't do this, there'll constantly be the excuse that these women are better off than being a house servant. Why are they better off than being a house servant? Because all kinds of indignant financial penalties by the owner of the house, the head of the family. They can do this. Yeah. So you get to bring them into an industry and use that as an excuse to say we get to abuse them here, but we just don't do it in that setting. That kind of awareness within that culture. No, that doesn't work. That can't be a rationale. And so the bottom line is this industry in its current form and the abuse of these women simply cannot survive without continuing in its current form, cannot survive without the continuation of imposition of violence against both economic violence